Let me take you through a hypothetical. You're a filmmaker, writer, director, producer, what have you, and you make a film that was completely standalone, filled with all the plants and payoffs that it could fill, had several fantastic character arcs, and a satisfying conclusion. The film made money. Lots of money. Like 3 times your budget money. You are rolling in it. You've got a fresh, crisp $20 bill in your pocket, and you're ready to buy something nice. What do you do next? Do you try a new movie with a new concept that audiences might not be ready for, but is something very passionate to you as a filmmaker, as a storyteller? Fuck no. You go back to the dripping udder of that cash cow, and you make another. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we're talking about sequels. Okay, so not all sequels are cash grabs, and the reality of the Hollywood business model is looking for new franchisable IP is something that we need to take into account. Lots of money is poured into every movie that is made, and it's better to have a baseline of performance at the box office and a built-in audience to make production companies and investors feel safe to greenlight these continuous blasting of still photographs in a dark room with added sound that gives the audience an illusion of motion and story. So if there's a sequel being made, you probably did something good in your first go-round. I'm going to be breaking sequels into 3 different types. This is going to be a very broad and very general explanation of what sequels are, so if I don't go into detail of your favorite, I don't care, this is my channel. We have the rehash, the continuation, and the Gearshift sequel. The rehash is probably the laziest type of sequel. Think Hangover 2, Scream 2, Lethal Weapon 2, the Austin Powers sequels, and Neighbors 2. Now, not all of these movies are bad. In fact, at least one of them, I would say, is probably pretty good, despite the appearance from the Australian anti-Semite Mel Gibson in Lethal Weapon 2. These movies bring back characters from the previous films and bring them back to the status quo of the original films, introducing conflicts that the audience expects because of their familiarity with the previous film. And they don't do much to break the mold. Some of these films bring in elements that challenge or recontextualize the first films, much like how Neighbors 2 adds the layer of sexism and sororities, as opposed to just being about fraternities in the first one. But the bones of the structure of the screenplays of these films are copied and pasted into these rehash sequels. The continuation sequels are films that either expand the world of the previous story or build on plot points that were planted in the first film. The Star Wars franchise, the Matrix sequels, the John Wick movies, and essentially every film that is post-Iron Man in the MCU. These sequels allow for more grandiose storytelling and building character development into multiple films, which allows for the potential for more satisfying and stronger connections to the characters and the stories. And the third type, the one that this video is all about, is what I like to call a Gearshift sequel. My idea of Gearshift sequels comes from an idea coined by Paul Thomas Anderson called the Gearshift movie. These are movies that start going in one direction with one tone, then there is a moment where the conflict halts, and all of a sudden it becomes a completely different film, genre, or tone. Examples of Gearshift movies are, and spoilers for all of these movies because knowing that there is some sort of twist that is essential to these films is in and of itself a spoiler for the movie. Psycho, Hot Fuzz, Audition, Death Proof, Full Metal Jacket, The Crying Game, The Place Beyond the Pines, $1 Million Baby, and You're Next. Psycho kills who seems to be the protagonist of the film, Marion Crane, at the end of a prolonged first act. Hot Fuzz starts as a fish-out-of-water British comedy turned slasher film turned Michael Bay homage. Death Proof introduces us to our protagonists again after a prolonged first act, where we get introduced to the antagonist of the film. Full Metal Jacket is a movie in 2 halves, the first being a fantastic basic training sequence, and the second half being a rather forgettable Vietnam War story. The Crying Game starts as a film that's about the Troubles in Northern Ireland and becomes a romance that has another twist that I'm not going to spoil because I can't show it. And You're Next starts as this mumblecore family drama movie turned home invasion turned send-up of the home invasion film. So when it comes to Gearshift sequels, that would be films that take the franchise into different directions than the previous one did. A clear change in tone or story type is needed to fit this definition that I may have just coined, but it doesn't need anything as radical as, say, Crying Game Surprise Penis. In order to explain how these sequels work, I have two examples of sequels that drastically changed the franchises and all have new entries coming out, or actually have already come out when this video gets released, within the last few weeks. I'm talking, of course, about Fast 5 and the Purge Anarchy. So from 2001 to 2011, the Fast and the Furious franchise was kind of trying to figure out itself as every movie came out. It was incredibly popular, but it wasn't what we think of now as a Fast and Furious movie. The first film, The Fast and the Furious, was essentially Point Break with street racers. Too Fast, Too Furious, greatest title ever made, is a Miami Vice type story. Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift is Karate Kid with cars, and Fast and Furious was essentially an attempt to bring the original cast back into the franchise and do some sort of drug-running story, but very still influenced in street racing. This is the most unlikely blockbuster franchise to exist. Every new entry kept on making money, so they had to make more. But what were they? They were all essentially films about street racers with crime and like some sort of heists and stuff going on the sides of the core story of driving cars fast. However, the structure of what would become a Fast and the Furious movie was cemented in 2011's Fast 5. Director Justin Lin and writer Chris Morgan took the reins of the franchise in Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift, taking control of the franchise away from Rob Cohen and John Singleton, directors of the first and second one respectively, and writer Gary Scott Thomas, who is credited as the writer of the first one and the story of the second one. Big credit goes to the chairman of Universal at the time, Adam Fogelson, as he's gone on record saying that he wanted to take the franchise away from the pure car culture where it was and turn it into a heist franchise, with these ridiculous car stunts being just one aspect of the film. So by the fifth, the creatives realized that they had this diverse group of likable characters who had all appeared in at least one of the films, and they knew they wanted to go in a different direction. So, in the beginning of the second act of Fast 5, the Fast and the Furious franchise becomes Ocean's 11. So the cast of square-pegged characters fits neatly into the round holes of what would be required for an ensemble heist film. Vin Diesel's Dominic Toretto becomes deep-voiced Danny Ocean. Paul Walker's Brian O'Connor, no relation, wrong spelling, becomes his second-in-command, like Rusty. Tej, played by Ludacris, becomes a tech expert, a safecracker, and a hacker. These character traits were just put onto Tej. This was not explained earlier in Too Fast, Too Furious. Tyrese Gibson's Roman, well, he just stays Roman. Sung Kang's Han is apparently a chameleon who can blend in anywhere on the planet. And singer of Imagine, Gal Gadot's Giselle, becomes the muscle. And finally, Jordana Brewster's Mia is Brian's girlfriend, expecting mother, and car driver. They're all out to steal a bunch of money from Joaquin de Almeida's Hernan Reyes, because actually the details are a little fuzzy. I just watched it recently and I still don't. Give me 1 minute, I'm gonna be right back. Okay, fuck yeah. I love this movie. It is so good, you guys. Like, there's a car chase where they strap a bank vault to two cars and they drive it around Brazil and they use it as a weapon and smash it into places. And they literally made a car, put a bank vault around it, and drove it around while it was attached to these cars, like behind the scenes in real life. It was fucking rad. Plus, there's this great final montage set to Don Omar's Danza Kuduro, who's also in this movie with his buddy, played by Tego Calderon. They're basically just the Scott Conn and Casey Affleck characters from Ocean's 11, and they get to do this. Dude, this movie is so fucking rad. So after a heist goes wrong, and Reyes tries to kill them, but fails, the gang finds out that they are in possession of all of the information of Reyes's illegal deeds in this computer chip. And Dom decides to get the gang together and steal all of his money. His $100 million. Just a side note here, he has $100 million. That's how much money he has. Wouldn't you need more to run all of Rio? They say that he's in charge of Rio. He's the guy behind it all. I feel like one of the biggest cities in the world, you could bump it up to 500 million. I would believe it. I don't know. The movie cost about 150 to 200 million to make. The movie's budget is more than the amount of money the bad guy has. Come on. But how this movie breaks away from the previous entries in the Fast and the Furious franchise is the structure of it. Again, it's a heist movie, so every character has a sequence where they do something that moves the plot forward to get to their end goal of stealing the money. Roman has to sweet talk his way into a police evidence locker. Tej has to drive around this remote control car and take a look at the vault, and also figure out how to crack the safe. Han and Giselle have to get Reyes' handprint in a very creative method so that they are able to use that handprint to open the vault when they have it. Brian has to drive fast. Dom has to drive fast. Mia has to talk on the phone and is there. Vince, from the first movie, dies. And it's sad because he's familiar. And so on and so on. It also takes the action set pieces up to the point of parody, a line which will be crossed well past the point of no return in future installments, while playing the ridiculousness of the situations deadly serious. Vin Diesel brings this gravitas to his performance that allows for his character's value of family, which has become a meme at this point, to be absolutely essential to who his character is. The film has almost comedic action with the melodrama of Shakespeare, and the film adds a further antagonist in the Dwayne Johnson Rock as DSS officer Luke Hobbs, who's on the trail of Toretto and O'Connor for their crimes. He is one of the greatest character introductions in cinema history, and the stunt-casted villain turned ally motif is created in this film. Another thing that will be brutally tarnished in further entries, what with Jason Statham's Deckard Shaw. Justice for Han. Finally, this film introduces that death is just a speed bump in the highway of life for this franchise, as it is revealed in the post-credits scene that Letty, played by Michelle Rodriguez, is actually alive, allowing for the next film to continue a thread that has been planted in this one, which obviously gets used again at the end of Fast and Furious 6, introducing Deckard Shaw, played by Jason Statham, as the villain to Furious 7. So needless to say, Fast 5 changed the franchise from being a series of movies about people who liked racing cars to becoming the behemoth that it is that pulls in $1.4 billion at the box office in a year that didn't have a global pandemic on its hands. And also, to be the first movie to go pre-pandemic with its numbers. We're over it! The Purge Anarchy is another one of these sequels that changes the direction of the franchise and sets the stage for what is to come. The Purge franchise is in the hands of one main creator, having the writer of every film, the executive producer of the TV show, and the director of the first three be James DeMonaco. The first film, 2013's The Purge, was a film that introduced us to the idea of one night a year where all crime is legal. However, the film's premise was more enticing than what was on the screen. Just a home invasion film. It definitely had elements of class and race that would be explored further in future installments, but for the most part, we follow upper middle class Ethan Hawke trying to keep his family safe during the chaotic night, from roaming bands of yuppies to eventually their disgruntled neighbors. It was not particularly well received, but it made $90 million off a $3 million budget, so a sequel was fast-tracked. The Purge Anarchy was released barely a year after the first one, and it does something that everyone who saw the first film wanted to see in that one. Instead of using the concept as a premise for a home invasion, this film tries to show the audience what the concept of the Purge would be like on the streets of an American city. The first act introduces us to a bunch of characters that we're going to follow despite them not having any connection to each other. Carmen Ejogo and Zoe Soul play Ava and Kali Sanchez, a waitress and her teenage daughter who live in a lower-income apartment building. Real-life couple Zach Gilford and Keely Sanchez play a husband and wife who are having a bit of a rough patch at the moment and are stuck outside during the Purge due to car troubles. And Frank Grillo plays the Sergeant, an unnamed man who's out at night during the Purge with his own motives. When the Sergeant comes across the apartment building being raided, he sees Ava and Callie fighting off their attackers, and he decides to The Purge Anarchy sets the structure that will be the mold for every other Purge installment, apart from the most recent one because I haven't seen it yet. That being an Odyssey-type story. You get to see tiny glimpses of society through the journey the point of view characters go on. So you see terminally ill poor people willing to sacrifice themselves to wealthy families so that their own families can get a nice hefty payout. You see a crazy lady with a sniper rifle going on about how amazing the Purge is and how badass she is. You see people kidnapping those who are left out on the streets. Oh, hey, Lakeith Stanfield. And you see families fall apart due to adultery, a gun, and zero consequences. And finally, you see the ultra-wealthy hold auctions for those that they get to hunt on the night of the Purge. Based on how cutthroat big corporations are, basically like the idea that most CEOs are psychopaths also, why aren't they all fucking killing each other to get a foothold on their competition? Or at least getting us some good, clean fun with some insider trading. The Purge doesn't just have to be about murder and, well, I mean, that's what these movies are, but it doesn't just have to be about murder. But what the Purge Anarchy adds into this idea of high income, low income during the Purge, which was used in the first film, is adding the element that there are state-armed, led, or directed platoons of those who decide to besiege low-income neighborhoods to purge the lower classes. It makes a very obvious yet very powerful statement, even though in universe this is marketed as an egalitarian murder spree, where everyone gets to release their inhibitions for one night. You get to see that the state uses its power to keep the boot firmly placed on the necks of those they would keep down, who would potentially use this situation to rise up. Speaking of rising up, there is a resistance movement introduced in this, where the Purge is bad actually is a violent, radical notion. That's Gearshift Sequels. Two pretty concrete examples of Gearshift Sequels. I might argue that even like anything that the DC universe is doing, like Birds of Prey, Harley Quinn, and the Aquaman movie are Gearshift sequels because they have radically different tones than the earlier films that have those title characters in them. But what other Gearshift sequel do you think is there? Comment down below. Let's get some Discord. Like, share, subscribe, all the greats.